you're on and catching this, just go ahead and say something in chat. Let me know that I've got some people on for this. But today is mostly review, so there might be some downtime, unlike last couple remote classes where it's been me presenting new material. This time I'm just looking for what areas would you guys like to talk about again, maybe try a different perspective on. Are there any of the homework problems that we've had so far that have caused you challenges? And also, while I'm at it, just let me know what you think of the REPL.IT site for the homework so far. I've got more assignments that I'm going to be able to post tonight in there, but I want to get your feedback on if you think it's been positive. Has it helped you through anything that you were struggling with? Especially if you failed any of them the first time you tried and then you passed them later, was that an effective process to help you figure out how to work over the obstacle that you had? So any feedback that you have along those lines would be awesome. Otherwise, again, any specific homework problems? I know one that I do plan on working through just because it's come up is you may hear my dog in the background tonight too. He's a little whiny because I have to keep him up here. He's not very friendly with other ones. And so got someone else here with their dog. But yeah, I know that we'll probably do the random guessing one, and we'll try and figure that one out together or solve it collectively because I've seen a lot of comments on that. If there's any others, though, that specifically come up and you're thinking, man, I would really like to work through that, just let me know. I'm trying to figure out where I gave you guys the random one. I'm guessing it's here. All right. I'm going to snag this, and even if we don't start right away on this, I'll throw it up over here and set sort of a starting point. Make this a comment so that I don't need that one. I just need my instructions. Oops. But I can have that in here. Ooh, okay, BizBuzz. Yeah, that's another good one to solve. I like that. Maybe we'll even start with that one because it doesn't require quite as much of the browser or other stuff, and it's a very common programming problem. So I think BizBuzz is a really good starting point. It won't necessarily involve arrays, but I may actually change the code to solve it using an array instead, just for the sake of doing something different. Actually, thinking about it now, I'm going to write that one down. I'm going to have you guys do that as one of your assignments, is try and do it from an array. I need a piece of paper. There we go. So let's get started. I'll do the BizBuzz one, even though it's not directly arrays or functions. We'll talk a little bit about arrays and functions. Maybe I'll do the random number guessing one, and that should be just a good recap. I know some people who have already had other classes, you know, this may not be anything too relevant to you. You feel like you've already got this stuff down. But, you know, if you want to stay around, feel free. Otherwise, definitely be putting some more stuff up on REPL.IT. So if you haven't already gotten on there and started working through problems, please do that. Also, if you ever run into a problem, you're stuck on any of them, I think there's even an option inside of that tool to just say that you're stuck or request help. Feel free to do that as well, because that gives me a notification the next time I log into it and check and see where people are at, and it can help me figure out where I can give people help. All right, so let's do, I'm going to comment out this bit that I have up here. I'm going to just get rid of this guy, and we're going to do FizzBuzz to start with. It's a really good practice problem. Let me see here. All right. It's also really good because it helps teach you to break a problem down. I'm gonna try and fit all this on a screen. Also, let me know if this is all, like the text is too small or something, if you need me to zoom in a little bit. I am fine with doing that as well. All right, so let's get started with just sort of FizzBuzz implementation. And we'll see where we end up. I think that's the terminal down here, yep. So let's see, write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100. So what I'm gonna do first, before I even step into any of the other bits of this problem, is I'm gonna start by solving that problem. So I know that I can do that with just a while loop. It's not too difficult. So if I just start at 1, because I want to go from 1 to 100, and I'll say while the index is less than 100, let's say less than or equal to, because I want it to go all the way up to 100. Then I'm just going to print out the index. And of course, the thing that you always have to do in every loop is you need to change your condition so that you'll be able to exit it at some point. So I just add 1 to my index. Let's give that a try, see if that works. Move up a little bit, we can see more of it. All right, looks like we got the numbers from 1 to 100, no problem. So now let's look at the next part. And this is the key to sort of breaking stuff down, right? Solve the problem one bit at a time. So what we already have here is a loop that goes from 1 to 100 and prints something out every time. So I'm going to put some comments here that sort of indicate the different bits of this logic. I want to print something out, and then the next portion of my logic is I want to increment my, or let me state it more generically, change my loop condition. In this case, I'm incrementing it, but there could be other ways to change the looping condition as well. So if I've broken it down like that, then if I read the next bit here, it says, I'll even get rid of the, I'll leave the but because it's important. But for multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number. All right. Yeah, let me break these down for each line. So I can break it down for, maybe even make them read the same. For multiples of 5, print buzz instead of the number. And for numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print fizzbuzz instead of the number. All right? So I'm going to take these and put them right down here. I'm going to just inline this as a comment because I know I want this bit of logic. So let me start with one of these, and we'll see how we build off that. For multiples of 3, print fizz instead of the number. So what I need to do in this little bit of logic is I need to check if index is a multiple of 3. And this might be one of the tricky bits if you haven't done this before. I did introduce the tool that is the easiest way to do this when we did the is odd or is even, which is the remainder operator, also frequently called modulus. And what we can do is if we want to know if it's a multiple of 3, we can check if index mod 3 is equal to 0, which means that there's no remainder when you divide it by 3. Then we could print is. All right. What we have now, sort of building it up piece by piece. I'll go to the very beginning. Let me make it even smaller because we can start with just looking at 10 and then we can see how it goes. That way we get to see all of our output or most of it. I'm getting 1, 2, fizz, 3. Okay, well, I don't want to print 3 when I printed fizz, but I am getting fizz out for what looks like a multiple of 3 or in the spot. 4, 5, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, 9, 10. All right. So now what I can say is, well, continuing to build up, I know I only want to do this. It's this or this. And if you have a condition that's like that, the best option for you is an else. This or this are my choices. So let's see if I've got there. 1, 2, fizz, 4, 5, fizz, 7, 8, fizz, 10. All right. So far, looking good. Let me know if there's any questions about the way we're working this out as well, or if something clicks, you know, chat like, oh yeah, I wasn't thinking about using the remainder operator. So now I've got that logic. My next bit that I want to bring down here is for multiples of 5, print buzz instead of the number. So I could think of it like this. For multiples of 5, print buzz instead of the number. All right, if it's the same sort of logic, index modulus 5 equals 0. Console.log buzz. But wait, I wanted to, well, let's see what it does now. Let's see where we're at. We get 1, 2, fizz, what I expected. 4, 5, I shouldn't see 5 in there. I should see buzz, and I do see buzz, but I see 5 too. And that's because I have this down here as its own standalone condition. But what I really need is, oh, it's this or this. And if neither of those, then I do this. Okay, so we can take this whole if condition and put it up here inside of this else block. Oops, let me fix some of the indentation here. And put an else around this. So now what I have is it's divisible by 3, I'll print fizz. Otherwise, if it's divisible by 5, I'll print buzz. Otherwise, I'll print the number. Let's see what that gets us. 1, 2, fizz, that's what I'm expecting. 4, buzz, all right, instead of 5, looks good. For 6, it's fizz. Expected 7, 8, 9 is fizz, and 10 is buzz. So far, we're looking good. All right, so let's try and continue to break it down and think about the next step, which says for numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5, print fizz buzz instead of the number. Okay. So if we can try it like we did before. We'll put an if block in here and make this inside of the else. And this if block will say if index mod 5 equals 0, and index mod 3 equals 0, then we want to print fizzbuzz, right? Now let me do a little bit of just math here. I think the first index is going to be divisible by 5 and 3 is 15. So we're not going to see this if we count just to 10. So instead, let's try counting up to being less than or equal to 15. All right, let's see what we get. Pardon me. 1, 2, fizz, 4, buzz, or 4, 5 is buzz, 6 is fizz, 7, 8, fizz, buzz. All right, what do we get at 15? We got fizz. All right. So what you want to do when you encounter a problem like this, your code isn't doing what you expect, but we know what the input to this was, is walk through your code step by step. So we say, all right, if I have an index, it's 15, what is my code going to do? So it's going to check if it's a multiple of 3, and is 15 a multiple of 3? Yes, it is. So it's going to print fizz, and then it won't print anything else because it matched the if block, so it doesn't need to go into my else. Okay? So it looks like I can't rely on just checking each one of these in this nested fashion, and I have to rethink some of my logic. The problem is sort of worded that way almost intentionally to make you start writing it out, which is the way you should solve this problem. You should generally just start writing out, solving it case by case. But then you reach this third case, and at that point, you've already written stuff in a way that's, in a little bit, puts you into a tiny corner. So let's see if we can work our way out of this, which is, we know 15, or anything that's divisible by 3 and 5, will also be divisible by 3 or 5. So we're going to have to check 3 and 5 first, because we need that condition to be the first one that's matched. Otherwise, we care if it matches 3, and we care if it matches 5. So I think logic around a little bit. I can take this condition, take this whole if actually, move it up here as this if, and then I'm going to change this one down here to be my 3 logic. And let me just double check. Multiples of 3 print fizz. So fizz. Let's see if that works. All right. I think we've got it. So the challenge, one of the challenges there was realizing that you have to reorder the way that your code works. And the easiest way to notice that, if you had it wrong, was to step through your code bit by bit as it was running and try and figure out what's actually going on here. Later on, we'll actually talk about the fact that you can step through code line by line. Like, this would be a lot easier to step through, say, in a browser, where you could look at each line because it's got really good debugging tools built into it. I'll show you some of those things in a future class, but that can be a it's really complex to sort of get the idea of what's going on when you start debugging code like that. So I think it's best to just right now view it as a standalone application. Now we can still simplify this a little bit because I can collapse these if-elses to sort of group them together, where I can say, let me grab this. I'll say, oh yeah, here we go. Here's the logic I need. Grab it like this, move it up into here. It's my spacing else. If this is the case, I want to print buzz. Else, I'll clean up the bits of code that are ugly. Else, if it's divisible by 3, print fizz. Otherwise, I don't care about any of this stuff. These lines, and I can change my indentation. Otherwise, print the number. So let me see if that still matches all my conditions. This checks for things that are divisible by 3 and 5. Prints FizzBuzz. We do that first so that if it matches one or the other, we don't. This one checks for 5. Print buzz. 3, print fizz. All right, I think it's right. I'm going to go ahead and change my index again to the upper index. Let's see what happens. I think we've got it. Are there any questions about how we walk through solving that? This is by far not the only way that you can solve FizzBuzz. There's a lot of different ways to try and solve this. Another one that I saw, which is pretty clever, is realizing that the only things that are divisible by 3 and 5 are also divisible by 15. And since that's the least common multiple of both of them, you could rewrite this line to say if index mod 15 equals 0, then, and let me do a triple equals just as sort of a best practice on these. Then we should print it out. Oh, I think it's, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not how it works. Let me see, hold on. 90, oh yeah, it is. So there we go. That's another simplification that you could do, but that requires thinking about it just a little bit, right? And you might even want to say, that's the type of thing where it's really useful to put a note in your code that says, by 15, I think this is the right term. I haven't used this one in a long time. You know, put a little note there to tell yourself, hey, here's a little reminder about why this is written this way, because this doesn't read clearly compared to the input, right? We solved it in a tricky way. You want to be careful when you do that. There's a saying from a classic computer scientist where he said that I think we can all generally agree that debugging code is about twice as hard as writing code. So therefore, if you write code as cleverly as you can, you are by definition not smart enough to debug it. So in other words, write your code as clearly as you can, and it should make it easier when you need to go debug it, because it'll be easier to understand what your code's actually doing. Any questions on this FizzBuzz bit? All right. Let's take a minute and let's just do a little bit of review of arrays and maybe functions as well. I know that some people were saying that those are some challenging concepts that we've encountered that we haven't really had before. So I'm going to open this Scratch document here, throw a preview of it. I can put these side by side. Let me see if I can get that working. All right, I'm gonna put the preview over here. Close this one, make this side real small. I'm doing this basically to just try and help show give some visualizations of what is going on with, say, arrays and stuff. So if you want to think about an array, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to come up with a really good visualization here that I can write out. But you could almost think of an array as a little bit like maybe a book, or you might think of it almost more like a 3-ring binder. I'm just trying to I'll give some different analogies here to try and see if any of them click with anybody. you might think about like say a 3-ring binder. So you can have a 3-ring binder with different information in it. It can have a lot of different information in it, and you can even add stuff to it. But when you refer to the whole of the 3-ring binder, you might pass it around and say, oh yes, I'm using a binder so that you can add stuff into it versus a book, which you usually can't. You might say, okay, here, open the binder to page 5. And that's sort of referring to two separate things when you're doing that. You're referring to the binder, which is a reference to all of the content in it. And then you're referring to a specific point within that binder, so a specific position. So that's what an array is like when you're dealing with it in a computer. Shh. Quiet, Gizmo. Be quiet. Good boy. So an array is, this, it really is just sort of this ordered set of things. And you can add stuff to the end of it. But when you're sort of pointing to an array as a whole, it's like you're pointing to entire object. So that's why if this is JavaScript per se, and we've got a variable that points to our array, var numbers, it's like numbers refers to the whole list. But in reality, it's not pointing to any specific item in there. It's just saying, oh, here is the place where you can find these different things. And you could think of maybe each one of these items in this array as a page, a point, an index, right? Each page in a book has a page number. Just like each value in an array, it doesn't matter what they are, has a number or an index to get access to it. And arrays in JavaScript start at 0, and that's because you can think of it saying, oh, just get the very first thing out of memory that this numbers points to. It's a little bit to get used to. I wish I had a good whiteboarding program or something on here. I don't have anything that I can really draw with very effectively. Draw. I don't have Paint on the Mac. I don't know what to use to just draw something. All right, let me see if I can come up with some other explanations of an array, if you will. Now, some of the different aspects about arrays is you can get numbers off of the end of an array. So I'm gonna step out of this and just pull up our terminal again, and we'll work down here, straight inside of Node. Let's make this a little larger. So right now, there's nothing in there, right? It points to, if you want to think of it that way, it points to like an empty book. I'm pointing it at a book, but there's no pages in it. There's no content in it. Or I'm pointing at this 3-ring binder, but I haven't put anything inside of the 3-ring binder. So that's what this sort of empty array is representing. And you can imagine when you do array.push, let me use a better name, because some people have also talked about how having more practical names, more real-world names, makes sense to them. So if I have an array of foods, and if I want to add something to the end, I can just sort of push it in there. That's a lot like saying, open up the binder to the back and add this page in there. And that's what I'm doing. And then what it tells you is essentially how long your book is now, or how long the binder is, how long this list is. And you can also pull stuff out of it. Now, we haven't really worked with that. We've only sort of referenced being able to look at the page. And the way you would do that is use essentially what is like the page index, or the array, the index into the position in the array that you want. So that's how you get an individual value out. And if we look at some of these different things, like if we did, let me see if I can figure out, how do I check? I think this is going to be a little weird. I think it should work though. I could be wrong. We'll find out. All right, let me see. All right, maybe that doesn't work as I was hoping. Remember, the type of the whole array is an object. It's a little tricky that way. But when you get an individual item out of the array, that's like you're pointing just to that page, right? So you can think of it, again, if we go back to our three-ring binder analogy, you say get the three-ring binder, what that is a three-ring binder. But if I say, what is the first page in the three-ring binder? The answer is, that's a page. The dominant array is. Yeah, it's stressing them out a little bit. Oh, man, I can't figure out arrays. You can, now we haven't worked with this, and I'm not going to have you guys have to know this right now, but you can also, we push something on, you can pull something off of an array by using a method called pop. And that's going to return the value and change the array. Like, it's gone from the array now. That's like opening up your binder, taking it out of the array, and closing it back up again. It's just a nice, easy way to store a lot of different values together, is really what an array does. Let me see if there's anything else. Any other, I mean, if anyone has any specific things that they wanted to go over with arrays, I'm happy to do that as well. Sort of talk about it a little more, however you want to do it. Yeah, it's really just sort of a repository for almost whatever you want. There's a lot of analogies out there for how arrays work. I think another good one is you could think of it almost like cars in a railroad, if you want to, like the individual cars on a railroad, because you're always pushing stuff onto the end of it. And in reality, the way they work in memory, and you guys don't need to know the details of all of this, but in pretty much the vast majority of programming languages, the way an array works is you can't actually remove an item from the middle of an array. You can take one off the back, again, a lot like, say, a car on a railroad track. Oh, we can remove this last car of that train, but you can't take one out of the middle, because you have to take everything off the back and everything off the front, take one off, and then put them back together to get something new. That's the way it works in your computer for the most part as well, because arrays are typically stored in memory. Each item in the array is stored immediately after the previous item in the array in memory. And so when you take something out of the middle of an array, even if the language supports it, which you can do with, say, JavaScript, sort of, then it actually pretty much creates a new array of all of the items you had before. You didn't remove something from your previous array, you pulled something out. Okay, I see somebody said modifying an array. Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit too. So let me add some stuff to my foods again. Oops, I did dot. Oh, it wants me to finish my command. I'm just going to do it here. Foods.push. Let me put some of my favorite foods in here. If anybody else has a favorite food they want to add to this array, let me know. We'll add it in. Say tacos. Big fan of tacos. And then let's be really weird. Let's put one of my favorite strange foods in. What do I like that's not as common? I don't know. I'm not really that weird of an eater. Swedish fish. I like Swedish fish. Now, if we look at food, they've got a few items in it. Ooh, ramen. Let's put ramen in there. Yeah, let's add some ramen into this list of foods. All right, now let's say we decide to modify one of these items in the array, right? If we go back and think about what's actually happening, let's pull up this example for a second. If I'm going to change a value in my array down here, I'm going to change Swedish fish. I'm going to say, I meant to say goldfish, goldfish crackers. And so I need to change a value out of it. Well, I know I can get individual values out by using this bracket notation. But the interesting thing is I also change values using that notation. So let me see, 0, 1, 2, just sort of start counting from there. Or if you want to have another way to think about it, how many steps from the first position does it take you to get to the item you want? So it takes 0 from here to get to it. And then it takes 2 steps to get Swedish fish. And I'm going to change this now because I wanted it to be, I meant to say goldfish crackers instead. And if we look, sure enough, that value's changed. Now, if you're thinking of this, again, we'll go back up here. If you're thinking of this like memory, and these are like 4 positions in memory all together, what essentially you're doing is pointing at this memory location and changing the values stored there. But everything else around it, the other memory locations, are still the same. And the pointer that you have to that memory is still the same. Or if you want to go back to, say, the 3-ring binder analogy, what's going on there is you opened it up to a page in the middle and sort of wrote on it. You didn't change that page. Or if you want to go back to the railroad analogy, this is like saying, oh, I have different railroad cars in my train, but each one can have whatever I want to put on it. So I don't have to, unlike where I said you can't take an item out of the array completely in the middle without creating a new array, I can unload an individual car and then put something else inside of it and let that train continue on its way. It's just a lot harder to take the actual car out of that location, right? But it's a lot easier to, oh, I take this, whatever is inside of that car off and put something else there. Hope that's helpful. I'll make sure to, I'll take some notes here while I'm doing this. Modify arrays for some homework. I can't remember, on the homework I gave you guys so far, did any of it include buggy code? Because I know I've got some of that I'm going to have out there as well, where it's like, here's a program, but there's bugs in it. And you need to find the bugs and solve them. Let me know if I did. And if so, what you think of that. I'm trying to give different types of coding problems so that people who approach it differently can have a chance at sort of different ways to learn this stuff too. All right. Let me know, how do you print out the list in the array in reverse order? Oh, that's a good one, right? Here we've got our foods. How can I print them out in reverse order? So the easiest way to do this, let's go ahead and when we hop over here, we'll go back up into my Scratch JavaScript file that I'm using for stuff. And let me get rid of all this. And I'm going to create our array here of foods. Let's make it a little longer. What should I make? Now I'm going to make a different one. What do I want a list of here? Let's see. Let's do books. I don't know. Let's store some stuff in here. What are some good books? Hobbit. I'm just going to do the Lord of the Rings series. So the Two Towers and Return of the King. All right, let me toggle word wrap, even though I wouldn't normally do that when I'm coding, so you guys can see everything. So if I have a list of an array of books, 4 items here, if I want to count them or show them, it's pretty easy to do it from the beginning because we've done that. It's really no different than what we just did for FizzBuzz. While this is less than books.length, and then I can print out the books at any given position. So let's see if this works. Anybody see what I forgot? Most important part of any loop. Change the loop condition. Index plus plus. All right. Try that one more time. What do we got? Awesome. Nice and easy. So there's a lot of different ways we could do this if we want to print them in reverse chronological order. There's no one solution to this problem. Or if we want to print these starting at the back. One thing that we can do is realize that you don't, probably the most straightforward of them is I don't have to start my index at 0. I can start this anywhere and count in any direction. This condition here can be whatever I want it to be. Like, let me give you a really weird while loop to sort of emphasize how random this can be. I'm gonna use index even though I want to change this. I'm gonna comment this stuff out. I want to be good about how I do this. All right, let's comment all that out. I'm gonna step down here and give you a really weird one here. I'm gonna put a random number into this value. So math.round. Actually, I want to do floor because that's technically the right way to do randomness. And then I want to get anything up to, let's go with 100. So this should give me any number up to, but not including 100, I believe. And here's what I'm going to do. While random number does not equal 10, I'm going to print the random number. Oops. And then I'm going to just change it to another random number. Because you don't have to move up or down. You can do whatever you want for your condition here, and you can change it in whatever way you want inside of your loop when you're doing something like this. And this code should, oops, got a bug. And it doesn't want, there we go. Let's see what I'm doing wrong here. Oh, math.round. I need math.random. There we go. Same here. All right, let's see what we get now. So I had no idea when that program was going to exit. I just knew that at some point, getting random numbers from 1 to 99 or 0 to 99, I'm going to get 10 as my random number. I don't know when it's going to happen, and it's going to be different every time the program runs. So it can be The reason I show that is to show you that you can use whatever you want for your condition. It doesn't have to be, oh, I'm moving up or I'm moving down some list. I can make this conditional statement whatever I want it to be. So perhaps the easiest way then to read a list in reverse order is to start at the end of the list. So let's say I want this to be, my index is going to start at books.length. I sometimes code in mistakes. You guys can see them too, but this time I'll do it books.length -1, because remember the index of the last position is one less than the length. And so if that's what my index is, then I need to change two things. I need to change my conditional, and I need to change how I'm changing my loop condition. So my conditional logic here, well, I'm starting at the end, and so I want to keep going down while index is greater than or equal to 0. Because I want it to print from 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. And then what I need to do is change my condition to go down every time. So let's see if this works. And we've printed out the array in reverse order. Well, now you're just writing crazy code. Could I put the math.random in the while statement to make it stop at any random number? I'll write that in a second. Yeah, I could do that. It would be very potentially confusing. We'll see what happens. So this is probably the most straightforward way to do it. And all it required you to do is flip your thinking around a little bit. It just requires you to think, oh, I'm not stuck in moving up. I can move backwards. I could start anywhere. Now there's plenty of other ways to do this as well if you wanted to go with a different approach. Let me give you one just as sort of a foreshadowing, because we'll get into these, which is that you guys are actually doing this the hard way if you write this out, because there's actually a method, and we haven't talked much about those, on arrays called reverse. So now I'm just going to do console.log books.reverse. And while I didn't print them out the exact same way, I've got my array printed out in reverse. Ooh, in alphabetical order? That's going to be a homework assignment coming up, which is going to be sorting some stuff. So that's a challenging. I mean, there's an entire set of different algorithms for how to sort something in an efficient fashion. We can do a very simple one in our class, but I'm not going to show you the really complex ones, because those are just, I mean, those take a long time to explain. Heck, those take me every time I encounter them, and I've read them many times. You know, it takes me like 5 minutes to wrap my head around how they work again when you get to the really efficient ones. Although there is, again, cheat a little bit. There's a little bit of a cheat that you can use, because here's another method, sort, just like reverse. It did the sort for me. All right, now this is just for fun. Don't get hung up on this, but I thought it was an interesting question that somebody asked. So let's go at it. Let's go back to this random number 1. Show you could have a loop that's very, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, non-deterministic for the most part is. So let's write this logic out. Let's write this while loop again. Well, random number does not equal 10. We'll start it off the same. And then we'll print the random number and change it. Now, I can just copy this. Make sure we change our condition. And let's see if this works again. I don't have a bug. All right, that worked. But now, the other side of this condition doesn't always have to be a constant either. This could also be changing. So let's do something really strange here. I'm just going to take this whole expression and put it over here as well. So what I'm doing now is saying, oh, this random number, whatever it is, needs to match some other attempt at a random number each time through the loop. So now it's much less likely that, like, I have no idea how long this will run. I can't make a prediction as to what it's going to look like, but I do wonder what number is the final one. So I'm going to output that as well. I'm going to say the random matching number was, that way I'll output it after it does match. I hope this works. Let's see. All right, 96 is, so that means that this was 96 and this computed to 96 in the same loop. And now it's just really crazy and random. All right. Again, this is really pushing it. Just doing some random stuff here, but there's a lot of different ways to leverage some of this. So let's go ahead. I don't want to go too long when it's remote like this and we're sort of off the cuff. So I want to solve at least one more problem. We might end up doing more recap of functions another time, but let's try and tackle this logic for the Gizmo, calm down. Let's try and tackle the logic for this guessing game one. And because this one is, oops, this one's going to need the browser, I'm going to switch out of here and move over into Cloud9 to work with. And I'm going to create a new file here. Guessinggame.js. And that's what I'm going to put in my HTML. Let me put a comment around this stuff at the top so that I still have my notes about what the program needs to do. Fix this formatting so that it works correctly. And we'll see how we can solve this one. Even numbers of multiples of X number. Yeah. I'll be giving you guys a good number of problems to solve with this. And hopefully you're paying attention during FizzBuzz, because I might, for those of you who already have that, it might be a simple problem, but just use FizzBuzz, putting them into an array instead of just printing them out immediately. So let's read the instructions here. Starting with the following code, all right, we've got that. Write a guessing game where the user has to guess a secret number. You know what, I'm actually going to even rename this so that it's clear. This is a secret number. This is the secret number that we want them to guess. After each guess, tell the user whether their guess was too large, too small, or correct. When they guess it correctly, tell them how many tries it took to guess the number. Okay. A lot of stuff going on here, so let's try and break it down piece by piece again. I gave a nice starting point here. We've got a secret number and we can prompt someone for a guess. Let's just run this HTML file, see what happens. All right, and if you remember right, there's a bug in here, so we won't see anything, but we don't have any code doing anything here anyways, so we're not going to see anything. So let's just make sure that we've got this working correctly. The first thing I'm going to do is just document.write, whatever they guessed. All right, give this a go. Let's see if it works. Cool. So I'm getting my output out. So I know I can do that much. So now let me start building it out. After each guess, tell the user whether their guess was too large, too small, or correct. Okay. So let me, I don't know, I'm gonna make this a little nicer. I'm gonna tell them what they guessed, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this logic in. Too large, too small, correct. All right, so for too large, if the guess is greater than the secret number, then I want to tell them that their guess was too large. You guessed too high. That's lower. And just so that I know that my logic's correct here, I'm going to put a little troubleshooting bit in here where I'm going to put at the end of this, for now at least, I'm going to say what the number was, and that's to help me troubleshoot this if there's any problems. I'm putting a little bit of code here that will help me troubleshoot. Now, one of the keys to really sort of mastering development is to learn to do stuff in small increments. So this is about the smallest increment of work that I can do and get something new out. So let's see if it works. I'm going to continue to guess 42. It says I guessed 42. The number I was thinking of was 83. Seems to work there. Let me take a really high guess because then I'm likely to be too high. I guessed 99. I guessed too high. Guess lower. The number I was thinking was 58. All right. So it looks like this is working. One thing you might notice is all that's getting slammed together on one line. There's different ways to fix that. It's perhaps the easiest if we just want to do plain text and continue to do stuff that way is you can explicitly put a new line character in. This is a little weird if you haven't written code before, but the new line character is /n. Let me see if this is going to work. I'm not 100% sure if this will work. Nope. That's because this is HTML, and HTML doesn't care about white space. So the best way then to make this work is to actually put some markup in with your stuff if you want space, like white space in it. So I'm going to wrap each thing that I do with a div. Now you don't need to do this. I'm just trying to make it prettier when it prints out what's going on. Let's see if this works now. Nice. I get a nice one line here. I'm going to do the same thing for each one of these. Say that this, when it writes it into the document, should just be a div. Down here, I want this to be the same thing. All right, try it one more time. Let me guess 99, which is probably going to be too high. Cool. So it's printing them out on a separate line each time. So we've got the logic for if we guess too high. Now let's do too small. And I'm good and lazy, so I'm going to copy this thing. if guess is less than the secret number. All right. Let's test this guy out. I'm going to try 1, which is probably going to be too low. Ooh, it was close. It almost had 1. I'm going to put a dot at the end of this, too, to make it an end of a sentence. All right, and one last bit of logic right here. I'm going to steal this because I'm lazy. All right. Now you notice I've been doing some sort of, if you want to think of it that way, some debugging while I'm doing this coding. Except this one's going to be a real challenge for me to debug because the secret number changes every time I run the program. And so it's going to be real hard for me to know if I've hit this case. So what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to force this to be a specific number. And now when I run this, I'll know to guess 5 to test this condition. All right, something went wrong. That's interesting. Anybody know what went wrong? I know what it is, but it's a little subtle here. All right, so what you can see is this condition didn't match, even though I know I put in 5 and I know this was 5. So I'm going to do something to help me out a little bit here. I'm going to cheat some because I already know, I think I know what's wrong here. But let's I'm going to put an else here for the time being just to debug this, right? And I'm going to say document.write you guessed into my div, give me some nice formatting. See what happens. I don't think this is going to help me here. I know it's 5, so I'm going to guess 5. I guessed 5. The number they were thinking of was 5. Yeah, somebody's got it in there, but so what could be wrong here? Well, what happens? Let me go read up on what prompt actually does from the browser. I'm going to read on what the window prompt does because something's going on. I don't understand it, and I want to try and figure out. Maybe I don't understand how this code works. All right, the window prompt displays a dialog with an optional message. Yeah. Here's my message. I can give it a default value. Ooh, what do I get back? A string containing the text entered by the user. Oh, wait a minute. A string? Oh, let me check something. Maybe that's what's wrong here. So let's see what I get if I want to log the type of what they put in. Sure enough, it's a string, just like it told me. All right. But this is a number. And if you remember, there's 2 different ways to do comparisons. This is doing a triple equals, which forces the types to be the same. So there's a couple different ways to solve this, or a lot of different ways to solve it. But in this case, probably the fastest for what you're doing, although it's not what you would probably do in a production application, is a double equals. Because if you remember, that'll do type coercion. So it will try and convert this string to a number and compare them numerically. So let's see what happens now. Awesome. Looks like that worked. So I don't need this else anymore. Okay. So I'm going to leave this set secret number for the time being, just because it's going to make it easier for me to debug. Let's see what we have now. After each guess, tell the user whether their guess was too large, too small, or correct. Well, we've got that. So what else are we missing? Write a guessing game where the user has to guess a secret number. After each guess, oh, they get to keep guessing. Okay. When they guess it correctly, tell them how many tries it took to guess the number. I'll come back to that. I'm not worried about that right now. So this tells me I need to have them guess over and over again as opposed to once. And we already know how to do something over and over again. We just put something into a while loop of some kind. So here, we'll create a while loop, and the condition is the interesting part. I'm going to take all of this logic and put it inside of my while loop. But how do I decide to exit out of this? And then how do I change my condition? What do I want to do for my condition here? Well, I know that I want to keep guessing until they guess it correctly. So I'm going to take this logic here, when it's a correct guess, and move it up here. So I want to flip it though, while guess is not the secret number, I want to keep going in here. And that means that when it is the secret number, I'm never going to come through here. So this logic needs to move somewhere else if I ever want it to run. So I'm just going to move it down here. For the time being. I'm missing one other aspect of writing any sort of loop that I've been talking about here, and that is I'm not changing my condition right now. Guess isn't changing and secret number isn't changing. So this loop is, if I get the guess wrong, is just going to continue forever. So I need to change one of these two things in order to get out of this loop. And since I don't want to change the secret number, because that would make it really hard for them to guess, what I want to change is the value for guess. So what I'm actually going to do here, and there may be a bug with this, we'll see what happens, but I'm going to prompt them again and change the value inside of this loop. So that way this will change every time and they get prompted each time. All right, let's see what happens here. So I know 5 should be correct, so it exited out, okay. I know 4 should be too low, and then 5 should be correct. So it says, oh, I guess 4, I guess too low, guess higher. Correct, I guessed his number. The number I was thinking of was 5. Okay, so it did work. Now you might notice that the text on the screen didn't change in between me putting those in. That's because it just doesn't get a chance to actually write that stuff to the page. It takes a while to render that. And since JavaScript is blocking the ability for the web page to do anything else by putting that prompt up so quickly, it doesn't get a chance to actually render that text. I don't know. Let me see if it'll do the same thing if I open it in a separate tab. Because if so, I didn't pay attention to that. That makes it a little hard to try and guess the right number. Yep. That makes it quite the challenge to guess the right number. So I'm going to change my logic a little bit to try and make it easier. And what I'm going to do is, if I'm not able to write something into the page easily every time, instead what I'm going to do is change my prompt each time. So now instead of writing it on my screen, I'm just going to say, oh, if I guess too low, then instead of document.write and needing this to be a div of some kind, let me make this a prompt and put that value into guess. Otherwise, do the same thing here. Guess equals this prompt. All right, let me see if this works. I honestly don't know. I'm sort of winging it now a little bit. All right, so I'm going to guess 4. Ooh, you guessed too low. Oh, I need to get rid of the div stuff. I don't want that. All right, let's try 6. That's too high, guess lower. All right, 5. Awesome. Let me try that again. Let me try some other numbers just to see what happens. If I do 3 and 5, it's interesting that it's printing out, I guess, 3. Oh, that's up here. All right, I don't need that in this case. I've just changed the way it works a little bit. I don't need these divs because this is in the prompt. I'm going to take a moment. The question was, if secret number is not a constant, will the secret number change every time you try to guess? Can you explain to me what you're asking by constant there? Because that could have different meanings. Secret number shouldn't change, at least the way it's written right now, because we only did this logic, wrote this logic once. And so it's going to always refer to the same value. If you're referring to const, as in this constant variable definition in JavaScript, that doesn't affect anything about it, and we're not going to get into that right now. It's probably in the intermediate section, but all that does is mean that you can't put a new value in secret number. If you did try to change the value, you would have an error in your code. I don't know if that's what you're asking about specifically, but. So now we've got, let me see what we're missing. After each guess, tell the user whether their guess was too large, too small, or correct. All right, we're doing that. And when they guess it correctly, tell them how many tries it took to guess the number. Okay, so we're missing one bit of logic, which is how many tries it took. So let's put that up here too. Let's say like attempts. We'll start it at 1 because they've already had 1 attempt from here. And then each time we go through our loop, we'll increase it by 1. You notice we're incrementing that in the loop, but we're not doing anything with it. We're not using it as the condition or anything. We're just going to use it here to say something. So here we can say, oh, the only way we're ever getting out of this loop, by the way, is if guess is equal to the secret number. So I guess we don't even need this conditional logic here, because it's guaranteed that it's going to be the right number here. So we'll just add another line here. It took you to guess my number. Oops, I want to end my div. I'm just going to get rid of this too. So what happens, I'm going to leave it hard-coded as 5 right now. 4, 6, 7, 5. Correct. I guess the number. It took me 4 tries to guess the number. All right. And now, you notice I left that hard-coded as 5 that whole time. That was just because it made it much easier for me to test all of the logic I was trying to do because I knew what I was trying to guess at. Now I can go back and let it be a random number. And what will happen is every time you run the program, you're going to get something different. So I'm going to start at 50. Let's see. I guess too high. All right, let me try 25. I guess too low. Let me try 37. I guess too high. Let me try 31. All right, too high, so 28. Too high, 29. 30. All right, I got the 30. And the key there is, since I see what you're asking now on the random number, since we only set this value up here, as long as we're not changing this again, this secret number, then it's every time you guess, you're guessing against that same value. Now, if what you did, and I think I saw some people and some of their stuff do something like this, like they changed the secret number every time they went through the while loop, that would mean that you're probably never going to guess it because you're not helping them get closer to the number every time because you are changing it every time it runs, right? But since it's only set up here outside of all of this, you don't have to worry about that. Makes sense how we got this solved? Any questions on this again? This one was definitely a lot trickier, but hey, by the time you've written this, you actually have a tiny little, like, look, I wrote a little game. You can point someone to your game if you want to and have them play it. You know, go ahead, play my little guessing game. You could imagine modifying this in a lot of ways to make it a different type of game, right? Maybe you want them to guess. I mean, you know, you could be really hard if you had them try and guess the type of food you're thinking of. That might be too difficult. But we can definitely build on this to make other real games that you could have somebody play. All right. If we have no other questions on this, I think I'm going to call it. I'll be adding some more stuff to the homework. Again, on repl.it. So if you're not on there, please get on there, get signed up, and start working through the homework there. It's a great way for me. I'll give you a really quick visualization. I'm going to try and move around a little bit, but I can actually see. I wish I could get rid of the names here more easily. I can actually see how people are doing and what they've managed to accomplish so far, and even help them work through the problems on repl.it. So it gives me a lot more capability in terms of knowing where you're at than if you're just doing it inside of Cloud9. It's really going to help to gauge how well the class is doing, especially as we're adding more problems going forward, and then figure out, oh, a lot of people got stuck on this one. Maybe I worded the problem badly, or maybe the concept needs a little more emphasis or something. So I'll be adding some more items into that today. Those will be focused probably mostly on arrays. I may throw some beginning ones for functions in there as well, but nothing too complex at this point. And I'll still be around, you know, for the next 40 minutes. So if you have any questions or any messages, feel free to say something in Slack, and I'll try and get back with you. Otherwise, we're going to be done for the night. Have a good evening.